Today we'll knit the ultimate loom knitted vest. It's ultimate because it's so warm and bulky, just about as bulky as you can get, and also very easy. You'll need a number 5, otherwise known as bulky or chunky yarn. This is the one I used, and these are the approximate amounts for the 4 adult sizes. I'm demonstrating on the Answer Ladies Make-It-Yourself double knitting loom. Any similarly constructed double knitting board that can match gauge may be used. On this board, 32 washers gave me a space between the rows of pegs of 2 inches, which is what achieved 2 stitches per inch. We'll knit the vest in 4 pieces, 2 that each are half of the back, 2 that each are half of the front, and then we'll seam them where the dotted lines are. Pattern includes 4 adult sizes that finish to 36, 40, 44, or 48 inches around. We'll start with the figure 8 cast on, which looks like this. Then we'll go into double knitted ribbing. Here's how it is wrapped, moving from left to right and from right to left. Note that it's very much like the stockinette wrap, except that we go from the front board to the 3rd peg on the back board rather than the 2nd when we wrap across. That establishes the pattern of wrapping that creates the ribbed appearance. For the rest of the vest, we'll switch to the stockinette wrap. Here I am only doing a quick overview of the type of stitches to keep the movie a reasonable length and avoid boring more advanced knitters. If you need help with these stitches, my loom knitting playlist is linked in the program notes and will give you more exhaustive and detailed instructions. So let's knit. Cast on 18, 20, 22, or 24 stitches depending on which size you're making. I chose to use a doubled strand of contrasting yarn. Doubled because my contrasting yarn was not as thick as number 5. The figure 8 cast on is loopy, but do not worry, we will be finishing it up and making it beautiful as the very last step in the project. With the main yarn, knit 8 rows of ribbing. Change the wrap method and knit 16 rows of double board stockinette. We now have a total of 24 rows of knitting to the underarm, and up to this point, all 4 pieces are identical. To begin shaping the underarm, bind off either 2 or 3 stitches depending on the size you're knitting. That's 2 or 3 stitches on each of the 2 boards. The remainder of the underarm will be shaped with simple decreases. To make them, we move 1 stitch on each board over, and on the following row, knit both loops off at the same time. The armhole will look like this. And one nice thing about double knitting is that while ordinarily when knitting we would have to reverse the shaping, make 1 armhole on the left and 1 on the right, we don't actually have to do that here because the pieces are completely reversible. But if we do make both armholes, say, shaping from the left, when we flip the pieces, the cast on will finish to a slightly, very slightly different look. And if that bothers you, the best way to get around it is to cast on 1 piece moving from left to right, the other moving from right to left, shape 1 armhole on the left, 1 armhole on the right, and do so for the front and for the back. Now we're up to the dotted line, and at this point, all of the pieces receive armhole shaping, and 2 of them also receive neckline shaping. So after the first 2 or 3 bound off stitches, knit a row. Then on both boards, lift the end stitch and move it over to the next peg. This action takes place on the same side as where you bound off 2 stitches or 3 to start off. Wrap and knit the next row normally, lifting the 2 loops on the bottom over the top loop, and the decrease will be complete. That's it for the underarm shaping. We're up to about here, and now we will just, for the back pieces, knit straight on until it's time for the shoulder shaping. So continue knitting until a total of 48 rows has been completed. That includes the 8 rows of ribbing, the 16 more rows to the underarm, and now 24 additional rows before we begin the shoulder shaping. Before knitting each of the next 3 rows, we'll bind off a few stitches. Doing them in batches like this gives us a shoulder slant that makes the vest fit much better than doing them all at once. Depending on the size being knitted, there will be either 8 or 9 stitches involved in each shoulder. Bind them off in this order. After knitting row 48, bind off either 2 or 3 stitches. After row 49, bind off another 3. And after row 50, bind off the last 3 shoulder stitches. On the back, there will still be back neckline stitches. You may either bind them off now or knit 1 additional row and bind them off then. That would be row 51. The difference is very slight, but it will somewhat affect the way the vest lays on the back of your neck. The back of the neck is a somewhat uniquely shaped area, so it's a little bit hard to predict who will do better with one version than the other, and your best bet is to knit yourself 2 vests and try it both ways. The bind off that I recommend is to transfer the end stitch over to the next peg, just as you did when decreasing. Move the 2 end stitches, 1 on each board, over 1 peg, wrap both pegs, knit 2 loops over 1, and repeat for however many stitches need to be bound off. If you prefer another bind off, that's fine. Knit the fronts just like the backs through row 24, where we do the underarm bind off. At that point, we will also begin to shape the neckline on the front. A link to this entire movie about full fashion decreases will be in the program notes, but here are the basics, an excerpt from that movie. Simply moving a stitch over is called the simple decrease, and we would do it once on each board to create a 1-stitch decrease. But I'm going to show you the full fashion decrease, which is a little bit different. The sharpness of the angle depends on the frequency of the decrease. This angle is made by decreasing every other row. If I want decreased, say, every 3rd or 4th row, it could possibly be a gentler slant. So it's time for a decrease. Counting in from the edge, peg 1, 2, 3. Same on the front and back boards. Move stitch 2 to peg 3 on both boards, and move stitch 1 to peg 2. Now we've accomplished the same thing as the simple decrease, but the outer column of stitches remains uninterrupted so that later seaming will be easier. In this case, we're using the full fashion decrease to give us the smoothest possible edge to the V front of the vest. So on the fronts, you're doing the armhole shaping just as you did on the back on the same rows, and at the same time doing neckline decreases. Those decreases take place after knitting rows 24, 28, 32, 36, 40, and 44. After completing row 48, bind off the shoulder stitches in batches as you did for the back. Now all we need to do is join our pieces. This is the seam that I always use for double knitting because it's very easy, and it's easy to see what's happening on a piece of this size and bulk. The edge of each knitted piece appears to have a row of chains running up and down right along the edge of the fabric. If we insert the needle under the bar that's inside each chain stitch and crisscross from side to side, pulling snug but not tight, we get an almost invisible seam. Join the center back to the center back and one front to one back at each underarm. It can be helpful after completing the stitching or a few inches of stitching to give a little bit of a lengthwise tug to make sure you're not restricting the fabric. To join the shoulders, a traditional seam would be very, very bulky. So I have whip stitched the bind off stitches together from the first side already. It's either the outside or the inside. And now I am whip stitching the interior loops of the bind off together. And I was satisfied that that draped quite nicely on the finished vest. Now let's get this neat bottom edge to the garment by tidying up the loose figure 8 cast on. You will see stitches angling towards you and away. And remember, in my case, 2 strands is 1 stitch. We need to pick up the end one and decide whether I'm going to use the stitches that slant towards me or away. I decided on those that slant towards me. Pick the next one in line up and pull it through the chain stitch that is already on your crochet hook, and work in this manner all the way around the hem of the garment. Because this is such bulky knitting, and because I'm using 2 fuzzy strands of yarn, I'm needing to help with my fingertips, plus a little tug as I pull each stitch through the previous one. And getting that tension on the tug just right is what'll tighten up the alternate pair of strands, which are loose up to this point, and get a lovely, neat chain-stitched edge. I've almost made the trip around the garment now, pulling 1 stitch through the next. And at the very end, we'll pull the yarn tail through the final stitch. There are quite a few yarn tails to tidy up, and that will be the last job. In every case, pull them through the nearest stitches right through the center of the fabric, snip them off flush with the fabric, then stretch the fabric a little bit, and the yarn tail will disappear between the layers. As garments go, this is a very easy knitting project, and it's easy fitting also. So as soon as you have mastered stockinette on a double board and ribbing on a double board, I believe you can do it. Why not give it a try?